Hey Michael.
Hello, hello.
Yeah, so I'm just waiting for a few minutes and waiting for a few more folks to join in, and then we can go ahead.
Yeah, sounds good. Can you hear me okay from the audio?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, perfect.
Hi Siddhant. Hey Kat. How you doing?
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. All right.
Yes.
Sweet. Hi, Michael. Hi, Concha.
Hi.
Hi. We're just waiting for a few more folks to join in, and then we can start. I can wait for 2 more minutes then.
Right on. Michael, are you here in Vegas for reInvent too?
No, I'm cheering remotely. I'm based in Nuremberg in
Ah,
Germany.
okay. Got it. I thought I had seen some evidence you might be here, but I must have.
Probably it's me retweeting or resharing some things from friends.
No doubt.
Maybe it was my
Twitter
team because
timeline. It's
because I think 3 or 4 of the DEFRA team are at reInvent.
yeah. I saw their booth when I was checking out the floor yesterday.
Nice.
Need to stop in.
Yeah, you need to like jump in and say, "Hey, where is Michael?" And then just kidding.
Right. There we go.
No, I only attended KubeCon NA in Chicago this year.
Yeah, I didn't make it to KubeCon myself. I was in San Francisco.
The next KubeCon in North America, you mean?
No, but Chicago, I wasn't able to go. I was at.
Yeah, next year it's Salt Lake City.
That'll be fun.
I'm
I should
trying
be
to
able to
get
make that
there.
one. Concha, are we expecting Marino today?
Yes,
Oh,
he joined as listener right now.
oh, okay. I will invite him.
Hey, how's everyone doing today?
Hey Marino, we're doing all good. I don't know that you will be joining because you'll be traveling, so I thought you won't join.
I'll be here. I'll let you. You're gonna be the star of the show alongside Michael, so I'll let you lead the conversation.
I think we can then start and then people will start joining in a while. So, yeah, hello everyone, and thanks for tuning in for today's exciting Twitter space. So, I hope you all like hearing stories because today we are going to be hearing lots of stories ranging from subjects like KubeCon, GitLab's adoption of Kubernetes, how AI and culture impacts DevSecOps, some remote work stories, and so many more. A little disclosure that you may or may not already know. So, Michael has been mentoring me and helping me learn more and more cool things around cloud native ecosystem. And I can confidently say that he is an amazing mentor and an even amazing person to talk with. Like I mentioned earlier, today's gonna be a vast array of different topics. But first, Michael, would you like to introduce yourself for our audience members who might not know you or your work?
Yeah, thanks for the kind introduction. I really appreciate like sharing what I've learned over the past year, probably it's 2 decades now in IT. Um, and I'm starting a little different to introduce myself. When I was in school, and this was quite like 25 years ago, I wanted to understand how a computer works. And I think I was 14 or 15, and there was this turbo boost button on a 486 desktop PC. And I couldn't understand why it wasn't enabled all the time. And so I started hardware software systems engineering. Then I learned how a computer works, and I figured hardware engineering is not what I want to do. When I create a bug, it's better to be created in software. Hopefully, nothing breaks. Um, and this kind of led me into working for a while in Vienna, in Austria, where I finished my studies. And later on, I moved to Germany following an open source project, which I really was passionate about in the monitoring area. And I think, yeah, the open source project I did that for around about 11 years. But then I found my passion in education and doing workshops and giving talks and things like that. So I bumped into GitLab, doing Git and GitLab trainings as a developer, using it on a daily basis. And this brought me in touch with GitLab. And since life is an adventure, 3.5 years ago, I made it so that, like 4 years ago, I made it so to apply for a job as developer evangelist, which defines developer relations, engaging in the community, creating content, too many things that do not fit in 5 minutes. So this is me. I'm originally from Austria. I moved to Nuremberg, Germany 11 years ago. I enjoy building Lego models in my spare time. So if you could see my background now, you would have seen the Millennium Falcon or specific other Lego models. And otherwise, I'm super interested in all things AI, observability, DevSecOps. Long story short, this is me. You can find me online as DNS MICHI, so DNS Michi, if you can pronounce the CH. Please reach out if you want to learn more of the space. I don't know how much time we have today, but I can talk like endlessly. But do reach out afterwards for a coffee chat or for something you want to maybe touch on in depth. Over to you, Akansha.
That's like a so fun journey that you have at Michael, and I can tell that you have a plethora of different experiences, and also the way of telling your introduction was quite amazing. So, starting off with something little more recent, I would really love to hear your experience at the recent KubeCon. Sadly, I wasn't able to attend this one, but I was fortunate enough to attend the one in Amsterdam a couple of months ago, and my experience was absolutely stunning. More than all the talks and keynotes, it was the people whom I met and connected with. That's also where I first met Michael and a lot other folks such as Julia, Pauline, and Marino, among others. So yeah, I would love that you share some of your highlights.
Yeah, I think it's hard to share all the highlights because I probably should mention if you attend KubeCon, you would clone yourself 3 or 4 times to really enjoy everything. I think there are many great talks and topics you can learn from, and even though you cannot probably not attend everything in parallel, it's a great way to scroll over the schedule and see, for example, Cloud Native is adopting AI, or there's more a movement with open source and AI in this regard. It was all over the keynotes, which I personally found super interesting, and it inspired me for actually creating a new talk and submitting it for the Europe KubeCon next year around AI and open source. The other thing I really loved is like visiting the solution showcase, seeing so many smiles, because the more often you attend KubeCon and community events, the more people you get to know, and everyone is super kind and super friendly. So the solution showcase also provides insights into the CNCF project. So I visited some friends from Cilium, from Captain, which is an observability continuous delivery platform, and many others. So I think there's still memories in my head from like walking around and talking to everyone, and I didn't really realize everything yet. I think for me, it was really great to see movement in technology, but also the focus on open source and communities, and just ensuring that everyone can contribute or everyone can join the circle. So I think the circle has been even bigger, not only in person but also virtually. And I look forward to see everyone in either in Paris next year or maybe in Salt Lake City later in the year.
Thanks for sharing that, Michael. And you are right, like we cannot highlight all the Kubernetes KubeCon experiences in one space. So yeah, moving ahead, let's shift gears to something a bit more technical and something that pretty much everyone involved in tech uses at some capacity, and that is Git and GitLab. Specifically, I would really like to talk about the amazing Kate's integration in GitLab. I know that GitLab has a fun story about how they adopted Kubernetes. I know a few details about it here and there, but I'd love to hear the complete story about it. I believe it started off as an internal hackathon, if I'm not mistaken. So if you could tell the whole Kubernetes adoption journey and some of the design decisions that the company took with it, and also if you could integrate the amazing CI system GitLab offers.
Yeah, I think there's quite a few things to unpack. So I'm not directly answering the Kubernetes question. Let's basically start off with like what GitLab is and how it evolved over time. And to be honest, I wasn't there in the beginning, so I also kind of learned about GitLab in my previous job, in my previous company. But GitLab started off like as an SCM, which is source control management based on Git. So it could basically say it was basically a web server for Git, but an alternative web version for Git, providing more collaboration capabilities. Like you can plan your software development lifecycle. You can create source code. You have issue boards, roadmaps, all the fancy things that typically are needed in project management. But I think in 2014 or something, it arose that like there was the GitLab CI Runner project as a separate project, and the idea was really to combine that into one platform. So it's not like you have two different interfaces, web interfaces, APIs, whatnot, but everything works out of the box, and you don't have to have like 1,000 tabs open to verify that the source code you're actually writing works and is continuously tested. And by continuously tested, it's like you're writing source code. Maybe there's a function that needs extreme cases to be tested or specific inputs or whatnot. And in the beginning, I think this was kind of what defined CI. And later, CI/CD came across a continuous delivery or continuous deployment. So there are two different definitions based on that. And you can kind of imagine it in a sense when everything works from testing, from verification, from a security testing standpoint, for example, then it's also safe to deploy in production automatically without any safeguards, without someone manually verifying that everything works and then uploading the zip file to the web server kind of, but instead using automation, uploading it via SSH to web server, uploading it to the cloud somehow using an API, or nowadays with the rise of orchestration and containers with Kubernetes, you deploy or you package the software as a container. You have a package registry in GitLab itself. So CI/CD pushes the container image to the registry, and from there you can continuously deploy it into Kubernetes. And to answer the initial question around Kubernetes, I think it was a GitLab contribute event. So this was kind of, to provide more context on it, GitLab is all remote, so we don't have an office. And this is since the beginning of the company. So there were yearly company get-togethers, which are used for socializing, but also inspired certain hackathons. And I think it was I need to like look up the YouTube video, but I think it was in 2016 or something, or maybe even earlier, where the company got together and they started, or they made a challenge with Sid, our CEO, to integrate Kubernetes or like the Google Kubernetes engine, or I think the offering back then, into GitLab and have the first environments and deployments into Kubernetes working, I think in 3 days time or 4 days time. And there's a YouTube video somewhere out there which kind of shows the process from planning this, from iterations, because it didn't work in the beginning, to really like the first deployment. And then there was a CEO dance. I think like a funny surprise for the audience. But in general, it was really a great moment to see when folks are getting together. Working remotely also is fine, but sometimes it also needs an in-person hackathon or some get-together where crazy ideas come to life. And this was the foundation for integrating Kubernetes in GitLab, not only for Google Cloud. You can bring your own Kubernetes with AWS, with the hyperclouds, or Azure, or some other managed service providers, or you you run your own Kubernetes cluster in your environment, in your network, in your DMZ, which can be integrated with GitLab as well. So the journey took off in 2015, 2016, roundaboutish, and today GitLab has adopted the agent for Kubernetes, where you can also apply GitOps patterns with pull and push, ensuring that all the deployments not only run continuously, but when someone, for example, changes something in the cluster and changes an image or something else, manually in the configuration, there's a drift detection so that the agent detects that. And nowadays it's integrated with Flux for GitOps. Yeah, long story short, there are a lot of features in GitLab also for Kubernetes, and this is partially the integration story. I hope this helps.
I love the origin story and context. I'm sorry, Akansha, if I can jump in for half a second.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, pass on to you only.
I don't know what the plan is to kind of like dive into some of the more nitty gritty of the Kubernetes integration and things like that, alongside context and how it fits together with something like Flux or maybe Argo or the other CI tools. But yeah, I always love the origin story stuff. So GitLab as a company was formed just before Kubernetes like kind of entered the scene, right?
Yeah, I think the open source project started in 2012, and GitLab the company, like formalizing a business around the open source project. GitLab Inc. was founded in 2014.
Right. It just seems like the timeline has been crazy since Kubernetes came on the scene. Can you tell us more about kind of what the Kubernetes integration means for GitLab and how that overlaps with and or works synergistically with something like Flux, a CI tool?
Yeah, I think from an integration or feature perspective, in the beginning, the integration worked as a push model. So like from a CI/CD pipeline, you would integrate the kube context or the context for calling kubectl or kubectl. I know there are some religious pronunciations for that. But the idea was really to like have that first integration, and later on, the pull-based model was kind of invented. I don't know exactly who was first or how it came to life initially, but I do know there were approaches to work on the GitOps SDK or the GitOps engine that was used, I think, in Flux, which then started out with the agent for Kubernetes implementing its own GitOps functionality. But over time, I mean, if you can always like create your own product, your own project. But there was certain evaluation being conducted by the engineering product teams with adoption, with feature implementation. And from there, it was considered it makes sense to adopt Flux in the future, or it is being adopted into GitLab, into the agent as well. So when you configure the Kubernetes integration, there's a tutorial in the documentation which instructs you if you want to use GitOps. Please install Flux. Like here are the commands, and I think one of the added features are there that the agent can automatically retrigger a Flux sync. But to be honest, I'm not deep down in there, so if I cannot answer everything in specific. But the idea is really to integrate Flux for GitOps, or use that and provide that for customers and users, and also ensure that when we invent something or when GitLab finds something, or the other side, that we contribute to CNCF projects, to open source, and ensure that that we're not like have our own sideline of the implementation of GitOps, but rather use common approaches, well-documented projects, great open source communities. Yeah, and I think one difference is probably that we still continue, or that GitLab still continues developing and using the push-based approach for GitOps, which means the CI/CD tunnel, where the agent basically creates a tunnel where the CI/CD pipelines can deploy from. This also exists. So users can decide whether they want to go push or pull based. Hope this helps answer the question.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so Michael, let's talk a bit about GitLab as the DevSecOps platform. I have seen a lot of promotional material about GitLab being highlighted for its amazing integrations for DevSecOps. So, for folks who might not know what DevSecOps is, it's basically adding a layer of security to your entire DevOps pipeline. I did love to hear some stuff around it and what technologies are used under the hood to enable the security scanning. Also, like, how do you measure the success of your AI-powered DevSecOps initiatives? Are there specific metrics or KPIs that you find most valuable in assessing the effectiveness of security measures?
It's a good question. So let's start off with like DevSecOps and DevOps. To some degree, DevOps can say like this is a tool, this is a platform, but DevOps on its own is about culture, about breaking up the silos and ensuring that everyone on the teams can understand the software development lifecycle, can understand why a production deployment is broken, can even like look into, and this brings the security shifting left into DevOps, can even understand security vulnerabilities. So it's not the siloed security team anymore treating all the CVEs and vulnerabilities, but I, as a developer, for example, I can look into a security vulnerability dashboard and then identify, oh, my source code is actually vulnerable. I should be doing something about it, and not just because I need to, but because it makes my source code more secure and I can really focus on what is important. Like implementing a feature is much more fun than fixing bugs. But really having the visibility of, oh, I can fix this bug now instead of fixing it when the world is on fire and I should have fixed it yesterday and I would be burning out from that. So the idea is really to provide toolings, mechanisms on a single platform, like a DevSecOps platform, to ensure that everyone can contribute and everyone can like also take action. So even if it's not my saying, for example, to jump into a security incident or a production incident, I can still do that because everything is transparent to everyone. And the idea behind DevSecOps on its own is, and this is also, it's not just security scanning. It's how to best say that there are multiple features on the platform aiding that. So for once, you could add static application security testing on a security scanning layer, which is conducted with SemGrep in the background and other open source scanners. So the idea is really to integrate what works well in the industry, in the open source community, and then wrap this into a generic reporting format and integration in GitLab. So you can see when you're creating a merge request with the source code changes, the security scanning runs, and the merge request widget, for example, tells you, hey, your code change would introduce 3 critical security vulnerabilities. Please fix them before the merge request gets even approved and merged, for example. On the other side, leaking a secret in CI/CD could also be possible. So, for example, someone hard codes an AWS secret somewhere in the source code. This needs to be detected as soon as possible in order to rotate the secret or revoke it, and nobody gets access to a production infrastructure or whatnot. There's more to specific scanners like dependency scanning, where your source code depends on a different software dependency version or library version, which could introduce a security vulnerability as well. This is a way of detecting that. In addition, we package everything in Many workflows include packaging software in containers. So the container image itself needs to be scanned, and the container image is basically a host operating system running in there. So there's much more potential to expose for vulnerabilities. And all of these different types of security scans should be done as soon as possible. So like as a developer, create a merge request, the integrations or the scanning kicks off and provides the results. And over time, it's critical to measure like how many merge requests created vulnerabilities. Maybe there are some insights which you can get from value stream dashboards and then also DORA metrics to make developer teams or generally DevOps teams more efficient. So it's not fixing a vulnerability, continuing development, and repeating it the next month and the next month. But how can this be prevented in the future, for example, to either replace a dependency or iterate on a specific release cycle or something else, which can be a good insight for optimizing and for efficiency. And this is also a way how to measure that, or how to measure success, not only like how the GitLab features are being adopted. So we do have telemetry and metrics for that, but also users, or in this specific area, this is a customer, it's a paid feature, value stream dashboards. They can analyze the efficiency or the productivity and optimize that. I know I'm talking a lot, but you also ask a lot of questions. AI powered workflows or AI powered DevSecOps workflows can help even more with efficiency. And this is not just like you are getting assisted code writing, or in GitLab it's called GitLab Duo code suggestions, where you start typing and then you get a suggestion, and with tab you can accept it, which makes you more efficient with writing boilerplate code or certain algorithms. For example, I always forget how to pretty print in a debug log in Python, where I can just instruct code suggestions to help me. But this kind of goes beyond that in a way of what I tried earlier today, opening the web IDE in GitLab, which is based on Visual Studio Code in the browser, and selecting a source code in Rust, and then right-clicking and say, explain this source code snippet to me. And GitLab Duo Chat opens, explains that, and while I'm reading that, I can continue coding and understand the algorithm, take action, and so on. There's certainly more to that. So I think at the moment we have at least 10 different features helping the DevSecOps workflow in GitLab. I just want to highlight two things. Explaining a vulnerability, especially because security shifted left to the developer. And now developers should also take care about fixing vulnerabilities. But first I need to understand the vulnerability, and this is often quite hard. So, for example, a memcopy buffer overflow, I know that because my background is C or C++, but others might struggle. And AI can help explain that and even propose a fix to mitigate, which I can copy paste and then ensure that the vulnerability is fixed in time. And I think this story, I've been telling these stories for quite a while now and figuring out whether they resonate well with the audience. This was one of the things where I was like, oh, it totally saves myself time. And I also know that others appreciate time saver. And probably another example to highlight is root cause analysis in CI/CD. Just know, like in CI/CD pipelines, you can run any script, and if the script generates a 10 pages long Python or Java stack trace, it can be quite time consuming to figure out what the error is. And root cause analysis summarizes the error and proposes an option to fix, which is a similar workflow. So I think AI, and we can dive into more feature examples in the next hour, is a way to make DevSecOps more efficient. So this is something super exciting. I needed to learn it super fast in the past half year, kind of. And it's also a great way to think about what is the most inefficient thing you're doing on a daily basis with GitLab or with another tool, and how to optimize that. Maybe AI can help you.
Right.
I probably have overloaded Akansha now. Sorry about this.
No, not at all. Marino, I see your hand raised. Would you like to add on something?
Yes, we need to go a little bit further back because I feel like, there's a lot of great context there, Michael, but there are some things I feel like we overlook and assume that the audience seems to know. Or, for example, I might not know about certain things. I have no idea what Dora metrics means. Perhaps you might want to explain to me and the rest of the audience what that is, what Dora stands for, why it matters when we're actually building applications and pushing into production, and some of the technology spaces that we should probably look into when we're considering Dora metrics.
Yeah, it's a good question. Thanks for calling it out. I usually try to avoid acronyms, but in this case I didn't. If you, and I'm doing that now as well, if you Google for DORA metrics, you will find certain additional explanations to that. You can also, if you add GitLab to that, you will find the GitLab page and the explanations for that as well. But in essence, it's a way to measure productivity or measure certain metrics is another word, to figure out whether a process works or there should be maybe adjustments to it. So measuring a value over time and then seeing how it evolves. And the idea is that you increase, for example, or not increase, you look at the deployment frequency, you look at the lead time for changes. I think the third one is mean time to restore. And there is also change failure rate and reliability. So it helps measuring DevOps performance. And the idea is that you're not, you don't need to collect that by yourself, but you have a platform which collects that in the background. Like GitLab provides that with out-of-the-box Dora metrics and having the visibility and also having the possibility to analyze this over time, to correlate these insights with other data available on the platform or with integrations, and also figuring out, for example, if just imagine you are releasing every month, or your software gets new features every month. And for some reason, after the security tests have been run, everything has been merged and the changelog is being generated. For some reason, the final release gets delayed by 2 days. And this isn't happening just once or every other month. Basically, every month there's a certain delay in the release. And the marketing team or like your sales team, they all have been instructed, hey, the next great features are coming out. And basically everyone is waiting until some engineering struggles are being fixed with the deployment to the website or to the App Store in iOS or Android or whatnot. And these metrics can help provide more insights into figuring out what the problem actually is. So could be like the deployment into production always creates errors which haven't been detected in CI/CD pipelines yet. So maybe the tests are not good enough, or maybe the staging environment is missing because everyone tests in production, or some other specific actions can be taken to ensure that the release actually happens. For example, on the 22nd each month, or maybe a different date. And yeah, this is probably one of the better examples to explain that. But maybe you have a different example, Marina, or maybe Kat. I see you raising your hand.
So if we kind of like peel back the terminology heavy DORA acronym, it sounds like it's basically describing the DevOps personnel human cost of DevOps risk. So deployment frequency, the lead time for changes, the failure rate, and uh, timeline to restore service in an outage. All of those sound like they're describing almost human terms as far as the cost of just keeping the lights on and achieving success. Would that be a reasonable summary?
I would say so, and I just looked up what the acronym actually means because I cannot remember that. It's DevOps Research and Assessment Metrics. So the DevOps Research Institute, I think, was founded to actually research on these, like you said, human measurement metrics and create create a specification that everyone can rely upon, and ensuring that the software development workflow, for example, is as efficient as possible, or that the team collaboration, that there are like problems identified when collaboration isn't successful or doesn't even happen. And we're going back into the, I would say, old world with silos. You have the development team, you have the ops team or admin team, you have the security team, you have the release team. Nobody wants to talk to each other. And basically, the releases are not delayed by 2 days, the releases are delayed by 3 months. And this can also be like a way to look at it. So I think your
So
summary is great.
I'm curious then, if it's a measurement of human cost and the impacts of just keeping the lights on or achieving success for an organization. Let's say I'm talking to an organization who hasn't really considered DORA either literally or just in spirit, considered those priorities in their organization yet. Usually when I'm having a conversation with someone, it helps to understand the end goal or kind of like the takeaway that I want them to have impressed, kind of that they walk away with. What would be the, not just the desired outcome, because it's fairly obvious, reducing failure rates, reducing time to fix outages. Those are fairly reasonable outcomes. But on an organizational level or a team satisfaction level, like what does it mean when you actually improve these benchmarks? You measure them, you're aware of them, you create a culture that fosters, improving all of these metrics. What does that mean for an actual organization? Like, how does that manifest in the success of the team and the organization at large, even beyond the tech side of the house?
Very good question. So initially, or like my personal approach to this is, teams bond with each other and you retain talent. So it's not like that people leave the company every half a year or every 3 months or something like that. But you can also see that a team that collaborates well or gets a hint on some things that can be optimized, they might perform even better and continue advocating for the company being a great workplace, for example, or changing the failure rate creates, and I'm making this up now, maybe there's an opportunity to save the company a lot of money by optimizing the processes. And the company in return grants a bonus, or there's a specific improvement for additional 3 vacation days or something like that. So as an organization, and I think it's again the human well-being side, it can reflect better on all the things we do on a daily basis to collaborate. In on another thought, when everything is transparent and everyone can measure can see all these insights like DORA metrics or specific other insights into the development process, it's not a finger pointing, blaming culture, but instead we can learn from one another. Everything is transparent. which helps to like improve our skills, exchange the knowledge, but also create an environment of trust and safety where you can like openly create failure or the probably. I mean, I did fail production many years ago, and I wasn't happy about it. But everyone was super supportive. I'm taking a quick break. I'm telling the story. When I joined the University of Vienna in Austria in 2010, or in 2009, but in 2010 I did that. We maintained the .at name server name servers, which means like if you type in google.at, I was one of the maintainers of the name servers back then. And we had also recursive name servers that helped the University of Vienna and 100K students resolve domains. So when you typed in google.at in the university, everything worked fine. Then there was a virus called Configure, I think, and we needed to analyze the DNS query logs based on that pattern. And I thought, well, the query logs are on the name servers. The name servers have enough power. I can run my Perl script for analyzing the query logs directly on the production servers. And since this took not just 5 minutes, but a little longer, I went for lunch. Yeah, and when I returned from lunch, I saw killed. The Perl script was not running anymore. The monitoring dashboard was red. My team was not super happy about it. They kind of figured it out. They told me about the problem and said we took care about it. We did a retrospective, talked about what should have been handled differently, like a corrective action, but always from a technical layer, not from a human blaming side, which I really appreciated. But since then, I never have run a script in production unless I was allowed to, and I'd rather like copy 10 gigabytes of log using async to a temporary server and do some analysis there. And I mean, nowadays you have probably Elastic or Graylog or some other logging platforms doing that on a central basis. Back then I had a name server and it had, I think, 2 cores or something. So I broke the recursive resolving of any .at domain for 100K students for 1.5 hours. I think the non-blaming culture and creating an environment of trust is one of the key elements also in the DevOps culture.
Kat, would you like to add some thoughts to it? Or
Yeah, I love how you wrapped it up into hug ops. That's one of the trends that I've enjoyed seeing kind of develop as the DevOps community becomes almost hyper online in some corners of the internet. Just generally seeing both internally in companies where that empathy piece starts becoming a key to the culture, but also externally, when there's like a major GitHub outage or what have you, and you'll see on Twitter, whatever, just like big hugs to, whoever's putting out fires at GitHub today, right? Or GitLab or wherever the outage is occurring. And that key piece of empathy in the workplace to achieve the mission is definitely a value for everyone, including even the customers of a business, right? Because when you have an outage and that empathy piece is in place, then it's not just a day of ranting just because something went wrong. It's an understanding on a mutual contract of appreciating the complexity of the systems that we deliver and all of the work it takes to remediate problems even when they pop up. So thank you for your wrap up on that.
Thanks. Now I have another idea because or another thought around this, because you just reminded me of how we treat things at GitLab with a production incident. And most things or most incidents are being conducted in public with a public infrastructure incident issue. Sometimes it's also a Google Doc when it affects GitLab.com itself. and the issues cannot be edited or something like that. So depending on the incident, everything gets documented. I'm based in the developer relations team, so I'm a developer evangelist, but I can jump into the incident Zoom call like any team member at GitLab can, and I can like comment on the incident issue, for example, and say, okay, in my area, I'm based in Nuremberg in Germany. I'm seeing that the website is performing well, or the CI/CD pipelines are not working, or something similar. And the great thing about this is anyone can do that. So whether you're a user, you're a customer, you're a contributor, you're a partner, whoever you are in the world, you can contribute to ensure that maybe the production incident gets resolved earlier, or you have a different thought of like, we should be announcing something more differently, or it's like a concern around specific other things, or maybe even a feature proposal for the future. At GitLab, it's our mission that everyone can contribute. And with a public issue tracker and also the incidents in public, I think this is one thing before I even applied at GitLab for a job, this kind of stood out to me, that I could watch engineers working together in public, sharing Grafana dashboard screenshots, and then figuring out the problem and also documenting the problem in public so that others can learn from that. So I think this is also tightly related to how I see DevOps as a culture. Collaborating closely and ensuring transparency.
That's an amazing work culture and beliefs you shared of GitLab, Michael. So moving ahead, infrastructure as a code is also like a fun piece of technology, and I assume it would play quite well with our DevSecOps pipeline. So I would really like to hear if GitLab has some kind of native integrations for it, or if it's there in the works. Maybe Kat can add on to this as well.
Yeah, just to reiterate what infrastructure as code means, it I would say it came out of the DevOps movement, which started more than 10 years ago. And it kind of describes, or like the things we did early before we knew about infrastructure as code, was deploying things in parallel using SSH cluster shell or different methods, and ensuring that an operating system, a virtual machine, Linux, Windows, macOS, whatnot, always had the same state. The applications installed there are in the same state. The configuration is untouched, and so on. And in the early days, I think CF Engine is one of the oldest tools out there. More common knowledge is probably Puppet, Ansible, Chef, and Salt, if it still exists. And with the movement to the cloud, we needed additional like API abstraction layers, I would call it. So there's Terraform, there's Pulumi, there are probably other tools out there which provide an abstraction layer to describe that how to create, use, and deploy the infrastructure. It's probably the easiest description. And the idea is you create a plan for which resources are needed. You need a virtual machine, you need a network interface, you need a public DNS entry for accessing the website. You probably need some storage in the background, and even more to that. And to be honest, I have no idea how it's called in each hypercloud, and which API to call and which credential is needed. So one idea, one pipeline that exists in GitLab is a Terraform integration for using infrastructure as code, where you can describe that these requirements using the CI/CD notation in GitLab, and also store the Terraform state backend directly in GitLab. So GitLab acts as a state backend provider, because otherwise you need to take care about this yourself, and this adds more time to continuous deployment, so continuous delivery. The benefit of that is that everything can be added into a single CI/CD pipeline or multi-project pipelines or parent-child pipelines. So, for example, the deployment, the CI/CD pipeline runs, everything gets tested, verified, security scanned and observed, deploys into a staging environment, which then provisions the resources in the cloud. When the deployment is successful and the observability metrics are collected, the staging environment gets shut down again, meaning to say Terraform destroy or cloud resource destroy happens, and you don't waste any money on the resources being run additionally. And from there, you can also trigger production deployment, which then ensures that, for example, the same amount of virtual machines or cluster resources for Kubernetes are intact, and nobody changes that on the Cloud Console for whatever reason. But you describe how it should look like or how it works with infrastructure as code, and yeah, that's basically about it. I have to be honest, I have never used Pulumi, so I'm counting on Kat to shed some more light in here.
Okay, so I am really, really passionate about the whole concept of IAC for a very, very, very particular reason. Ultimately, if we look at the history of humans operating computers, we went from this entire, early stage paradigm of really heavy reliance on hands on keyboard or like physically connecting servers up and doing all of the work to make sure that the architecture that you mapped out and designed is physically implemented. And that was truly a huge advancement in the world of just information systems. But then the need for these scaled massively. And suddenly we saw the advent of many things for automation. In the early days, obviously, you were doing a lot of Bash and Perl and basic systems administration through the tools available at the time. And as that matured, you saw entire tool sets developed, whether that's Ansible, Salt, Chef, Puppet, those other automation tools, which were better at managing larger numbers of systems to achieve those same system administration outcomes. And then the entire digital landscape scaled to such a degree that even automation was being taxed to its limit. And what I mean by that is almost a systems fatigue scenario where if you're deploying, say, Ansible, which I've done a lot of, and you are actually operating thousands of systems, that imperative workflow represents a risky surface area where you're describing step by step in excruciating detail everything that needs to be performed to achieve your desired outcome. And that becomes fairly brittle. So even if you cover edge cases and write tests to make sure that the outcome you're aiming for is achieved, covering every possible edge case is extremely difficult, if not impossible. And so there's always that risk with an automation approach to systems orchestration, where you risk something deep, a train derailment, if you will, almost. And that's where IAC steps in. So the difference between automation, where you're describing everything step by step to achieve your outcome, and orchestration is that in orchestration, you're state driven. So automation doesn't really understand how you left a system. So yesterday, if you perform some automation, tomorrow, it's not going to know what happened yesterday. Whereas a state driven automation tool like Terraform or Pulumi, what that does is it performs the automation tasks that you have scheduled, and it records the state, how many virtual machines, what operating system, all of your network policies, and records this state in a file so that it understands tomorrow how you left things today. That gets really, really interesting because instead of describing step by step everything that needs to happen to achieve your outcome, all that you do with IAC is describe the outcome itself. You say, I want these virtual machines. I want this Kubernetes cluster on them. It's the paradigm difference of going to a drive-through and saying, hey, I want a hamburger, and they give you the hamburger. Where almost as an analogy for orchestration in IAC, as opposed to automation, which would be almost analogous to driving up to place your order and saying, I want a hamburger and I need you to, get the buns out and put the mayonnaise or the mustard or whatever on it. And then you're telling them step by step everything that they have to do to give you the food that you're hoping to get, that outcome that you're hoping to achieve, right? In the case of Pulumi, what we did looking at the problem is identified that other orchestration tools are leaning on custom languages. So you commonly referred to as a DSL or a domain-specific language. And what happens is languages for a lot of these automation and orchestration tools are custom built from scratch exclusively to meet the needs of just the orchestration tools designed objectives. Where that differs from other languages is that it's not Turing complete, meaning it doesn't have the full capability of expressing and solving truly all types of logic problems that classical programming languages can do, whether it's Python, Java, Golang, what have you. So Pulumi saw the difficulty and the edge cases that are just extremely hard to work around within the constraints of a non-Turing complete HCL or DSL, and said, why don't we just write our IAC in a programming language so that we have the full expressive function of mature programming languages, including all of the developer amenities. So, for version control and SDKs and debuggers and all of that, because programmers have already achieved great success with solving all these problems in the different language ecosystems. And that is the TLDR of how we got from early automation type systems to orchestration, declaring what you want, and being able to do all of that in conventional programming languages with Pulumi.
Thanks, that's a great explanation and introduction into Pulumi. While you explained that, I quickly opened the Pulumi website and looked into the getting started tutorials actually. And this sounds actually super easy to adopt. Probably I should reserve some time this month, to look into it, like using infrastructure as code inside a programming language can be helpful if you don't want to learn another domain-specific language. Like Terraform has, I don't know exactly what HCL means, but you need to learn a different language. Well, Puppet has a domain-specific language as well. Or you need to learn YAML or use YAML, which can also be like an entry barrier. I saw a question in as a response to our Twitter space from someone like 40 minutes ago or something, and I want to make sure we answer that. How to get started with DevOps or how to get started with DevSecOps, because there are so many resources out there. And I do agree, it's a lot to learn and understand. My recommendation in this regard would be to create a learning pathway in a sense of understand what Linux is, or create a Linux base here, or use a Linux fundamental course to level up your knowledge, learn about containers next, skip Kubernetes for now, figure out like you can start on gitlab.com, for example, create a free account, learn about source code management, CI/CD, and then, for example, add resources like I want to provision something in a preferred cloud, look into Terraform, infrastructure as code, Pulumi, then learn about cloud native Kubernetes, try to deploy the same application you just deployed into the cloud into a Kubernetes cluster. It will probably work a little different, but find a use case for that. And don't try to understand everything, because this is a story of mine. I try to understand Kubernetes because I like to look behind the curtain of everything. Like I want to understand AI, I want to understand everything. Doesn't work. For Kubernetes, I had the same problem, and I wanted to understand all the different resource types. So my learning progress was basically -10 all the time. And then someone said, you have been doing a lot of monitoring open source development. Maybe you want to create a course or training about monitoring Kubernetes. And I was like, oh, I have no idea about Kubernetes, but I probably should be doing that workshop because this is a challenge to learn it. And since I found a use case to monitor an application deployed in Kubernetes and integrated with CI/CD and GitLab, this kind of made an impact on my learning journey. I still haven't understood everything, so I'm still learning what a service mesh is, and Marino does a great job explaining that. But it's the 5-minute success which gets you addicted. And you don't have to learn it in just 1 year. Take your time with learning. And I hope this short advice helps. But please reach out if you want to talk more about it.
Thanks for sharing that, Michael. And like, I'm pretty sure that whatever you shared is pretty useful to him as well. So we are running out of time, and I did have one last question, but I will not take that up because we will run out of time. Okay, so Michael, Kat, Marino, any closing remarks that you'd like to share?
I would actually ask you to ask your question.
Oh, if that's okay. So, I wanted to ask that, like, like how has been your experience with platforms? Like, does GitLab use any sort of a developer portal internally? And if so, like, what are some of the advantages you have experienced by adopting it?
So we are using GitLab to develop GitLab, and we're trying to provide as many features as a developer portal can provide. Potentially, like if you look at Backstage by Spotify and other open source projects, there's a lot to learn and a lot of things to adopt. I think I think it's great to see the wide adoption and the wide interest also at KubeCon around developer portals. But I would also say, like, it doesn't have to be like just a developer portal. Maybe it can be a DevSecOps platform like GitLab itself provides, or any other sort of more insight into productivity, but also team collaboration. One of the thoughts is like having public roadmaps, work in public, similar to ensuring, and this is something I wanted to highlight as well with GitLab, ensuring that everyone can contribute. So, for example, if you develop a product, develop it in the open, document things, ensure that when a merge request or pull request comes in, that someone takes care of that, and not just like reviewing that, but also providing an experience, which we at GitLab try to do with our engineering and contributor success teams, ensuring that a contribution is a success moment, and maybe this can be an enabler for maybe future career aspirations, learning opportunities, and whatnot. So I think having everything on a single platform enables others, to contribute, to collaborate, and so on. So I think the platform engineering approach, providing a platform, using GitLab for that, using something else, or integrating with, will be definitely a hot topic in 2024.
Thanks, Michael, for taking that question, even though it's over time, but I really appreciate that. So yeah, that was an amazing conversation that we had today, and really a big thanks, Michael, for joining us today and sharing wealth of knowledge. So I certainly learned a lot, and there was a lot that you shared, and the way you tell everything in a form of a story, it's really interesting, which I certainly very enjoyed. So yeah, and big thanks to Marino and Kat as well for co-hosting. It was great. So yeah, Kat or Marino, if you like to share anything, and Michael, before we wrap up now.
Hey, it was fun. Michael, thanks for joining. Concha, as always, thank you for organizing and getting the show on the road.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. Sorry, I'm on the road. I'm heading to a meetup now, so excellent space here, and I hope we get to see you all next week on the next one.
Yeah, so thanks again, Michael, and everyone who joined us today. So yeah, I will now close the space and see you in the next one. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Kat, Marino, and everybody.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to having a coffee chat or hopefully seeing you at an in-person event in the future.
Yes. Okay. Bye bye.